In studio right now, Steve Hauck, formerly Lieutenant Steve Hauck with the UPD, retired, so to speak. That never means you stop working. I know you're very busy, but a great deal of knowledge in this world, and of course, a lot of knowledge on the Caitlin Conley case, and of course the trial. And I'm sure you watched Dateline on Friday night.
Sure.
What'd you think?
I think it was well done. I think that there's, I don't know how you take a case as complicated as this.
Yeah,
it's been drawn out and put it into 2 hours, minus commercials. So I think they did overall. I think they did a good job of presenting the case as, for what it was at the time.
They did a nice job. I think they did a nice job laying it out, almost changing the timeline a little bit. So we all knew that Bill Yoder is with Mary Yoder's sister now. We know that. Right. The rest of the country had no clue, and they held that out till the very end. You didn't find that out until like 10:45 or something.
Yeah, I thought to myself, is there a reason that they're not saying?
They wanted the bombshell, and they did the big reveal
and everything like that.
Yeah,
right.
there was Hollywood placed on this, but at the same time, I thought they did a really good job. The other thing that the takeaway, and we should all consider as we're talking about this, and we've really been talking about it several times throughout the course of the morning. But the takeaway is, and they tried to kind of reiterate this a little bit, is that both sides of the family, which are now, it's like a civil war, they both agree that Mary Yoder was an amazing woman who was healthy and just was such a positive for so many different people, and it is such a tragedy. And at the end of the day, there are families here, both sides of the Yoder family, plus the Conley family, that have just been torn to shreds through this, right?
Yeah,
it's terrible. There's just so many victims.
Yeah, and I don't see how, even if Caitlin Conley is successful in the appeal process, then you're just going to have the other side of the family that's sort of torn apart by the fact that she got away with it in their mind. So it's just the whole thing's terrible. I mean, just all these people who are, especially some of the people are. You've got almost people beginning their life, and then you got people, sort of like going into the twilight of their life, and they've got to deal with the loss of this woman who seems to have been sort of the linchpin in the whole family on both sides. Seems to have been well liked by everybody and loved and adored, and it's terrible.
And I have to say, hearing the father, the Conley mother and father, talk about how they went out to the sheriff's office. And the father trying to describe how they came out and told him that she wasn't going home and that she was going to be charged with murder. And then, of course, what they went through in the courtroom with the guilty verdict. You just see, and then the sisters, the daughters of Mary Yoder, that were crying through the entire Dateline episode. It's just terrible when you think about it all. But what I like about watching drama on TV is they always have the smoking gun. There's never they don't ever walk away saying, I wonder if she really did do it. Because there's always that piece of evidence that proves unequivocally that this is the murderer. And you might say, well, there is a smoking gun. And the prosecution will say, we have several smoking guns, but nothing that 100% proves her guilt.
Well, I think that if you, I suppose that's how they decide when they go to produce a. Because there's lots of murders across the country.
By the 50th minute in the hour-long episode of whatever, you just know
they're going to Law and Order.
Yeah, they're going to have a DNA, or there's going to be a flashback, or the person's going to be like, "All right, I did it. Right. Yes, I did it, and here's why." Right?
I would have got away with it too.
There's none of that here. This is real life.
Yeah, and I do think that I'm sure that when it's produced, they want. I'm assuming they want the viewer to have some sort of commitment one way or the other, because that makes it compelling. I mean, if it's not compelling, then why show it?
Although I felt they kind of left it to the viewer.
I think to a certain degree they did. I think if I do think if you're on the side that said she did it.
You still think she did it?
Right. And I think if you're on the side that said there's a lot of questions there, then I think you're still there. So
I agree.
I don't think there was one thing that went one way.
Andrew felt they slanted it. You felt it was slanted?
A little bit. I think with showing the evidence about, they emphasized, it was her evidence or her DNA on the bottle, the cardboard around the colchicine bottle, but never mentioned the gloves or the mask that was in his car. and they talked.
That was a big omission. I thought they made a mistake by not including the gloves and the goggles and all that stuff.
I just think they attempted to.
Did the gloves and the goggles have colchicine on them though?
I don't know. I don't think so.
did.
But
No,
still,
but
though, they're all in the. You have colchicine, aka the murder weapon, and then you have gloves and the goggles and all that stuff. And he said, "Well, I use that to work on cars." But again, circumstantial. The defense said, "Oh, yeah, right. You use that because that's what you would use when you're handling research grade colchicine."
See, so I have, and I can explain this. In my trunk, I have gloves and I have goggles.
Yeah.
Which, do you remember a few years ago the tax
You better
day?
be careful. I get those out of your car immediately.
Do you remember we went over to? I went over to Tony's in Washington Mills.
Yeah.
We had the old IBX van. We smashed out the windows. It was the take your frustrations out on tax day.
Yes.
I still
You
have,
still have those goggles.
gloves and goggles
and
in
the
my
sledgehammer
trunk.
too.
And the shovel and the lime. But
Yeah.
people don't know about-
And he's researched on Google colchicine, how to beat a lie detector test. He's done all this
Well,
stuff.
can I ask you too, because you've seen this over the course of your career, is that when you started, I mean, you're still a young guy, but we'll go back 25 years, all this stuff that we use now as evidence wasn't really available to you to use as evidence, right? I mean,
No.
looking at someone's laptop and, I mean, DNA was around, but not like it is today.
Right.
And, going in and what did you search on what date? And
Yeah.
What did you search after you
You'd have to
searched
try
that?
and get like fingerprints on an encyclopedia.
Could you
No.
ever imagine all that stuff would be used as evidence in a trial? What somebody looked at 3 months before somebody died? It's just kind of mind-blowing a
No,
little
well,
bit.
even when I was, investigating homicides, early as an investigator, we didn't really have any of that stuff. It was, I mean, obviously we had cell phones, but the ability to track them and see what's out there and sort of do the background on them wasn't around. So, there's a lot of different ways investigations are done. There's not one particular way that's successful. I think it depends on the circumstances, how much evidence you have, your suspect, because all suspects are a little different. You have somebody that's never been in the criminal justice system ever before, and then you have people that are hardened sort of criminals that have been in a million times and know the process. So you go about it different ways. I think I go back to, and I've said this to Bill, my whole takeaway from the whole case is, after having followed it, not been in the courtroom, but followed it, is the sheriff's department are very professional people. They're good at what they do. They're not shady. They're not going to pull any fast ones.
Right.
The district attorney, exactly the same thing. All the people involved in this case are unbelievably professional and very good at what they do.
They're all convinced.
If there was something there that said, hey, this other person might have done it, they're not going to just ignore it because it goes against the theory of their case. They're going to look into it. They're going to take a step back and say, okay, we need to re-examine this.
Let me ask you this. Tough question. Wouldn't it have been better if Bill and Adam Yoder did not testify in the grand jury and did not get immunity? Because that has become a point of contention.
Well, here's the problem. If you don't have sort of the setup,
but you didn't need
of
them.
that.
You don't need them. You really didn't need them to. I mean, you can indict somebody so easily in a grand jury. Did you really need Bill and Adam Yoder there? Especially if you were going to lose the possibility that if something came out down the road, I mean, you're giving them immunity. Did you really need that?
But then who do you present to the grand jury? You can't walk into a grand jury with a pile of papers.
I want to ask the DA's office.
Right, but you have to.
If it's learned that they lied, even down the road, if it's learned that they lied in grand jury, the immunity would be out.
Yes, but that I've heard is not an easy process.
Right, but I think during a grand jury, you can't walk in with a stack of papers and say, here, read these, and then tell me if you want to indict. It doesn't work that way. You have to have testimony. So you've got to put someone there.
What testimony do you really have in such a circumstantial case to begin with?
Well, I think you look and say that she was a very healthy woman, very fit, in good shape, had no reason to take colchicine, never used it before, never had it in the house, never used it in the office. I think all those sorts of things you have to present to a jury.
I just think, given the immunity thing, I'm sorry, I think that was bad.
Just to play devil's advocate here, you could argue if they never testified before the grand jury, I think a defense lawyer would say, I find it interesting that you didn't talk to these two people during grand jury because you knew they would get immunity and you didn't want to give it to them because you, the prosecutor, aren't convinced that Caitlin was responsible.
I just don't think anybody should be given immunity. I just think that's a bad situation, especially in a case that's built on so much circumstantial evidence that has so much. I mean, as I said earlier, I still think you could have pointed the finger to, and you disagree with this, but you could have pointed the finger to either one of those, either Adam or Bill, and presented a pretty hefty case similar to the case that you presented against her. And I understand there's a lot of evidence, but you could just, your case could be, hey, they were trying to set her up and pin this on her. I think a circumstantial case could have been presented against any of the three.
Okay, so here's the thing about, the direct evidence, testimonial, and circumstantial evidence. A lot of people look at circumstantial evidence as not as good as, say,
Right.
direct testimony. I think it's totally the opposite. It's way more reliable than direct testimony because people's memories are different.
Right.
Your interpretation, especially under stress, and I've talked to you about this before.
yeah.
When you're under stress, your mind sort of goes to another place.
And you're trying to get people to remember from back, it's been a,
right.
right, it was 2015.
Right.
is
What's
when
your
the-
ability to recall facts? What's
Right.
your previous, if you had a life and death sort of scenario in which, someone's life was threatened, but you've got, say it's a bank, you got a bank
Yeah.
robbery, and you've got, a couple of retired cops in there, and maybe you got a couple military guys, I'm going to trust their memory way more than I would, say, a group of you guys.
Right,
How
right.
many times have you had somebody threaten your life? How many times you had somebody pull a knife on you or a gun? Never, right? So you see this happen, and your mind sort of goes to another place as opposed to someone that's had it happen many times. So everybody's memory is a little different. I actually
Get
think
it.
circumstantial evidence is way more reliable because it is, for the most part, just factual.
You're-
Here's the records of the phone.
You are a media specialist. That was your role for the Utica Police Department. It's
Right.
something you do incredibly well.
Thank you.
And we've certainly experienced it. You do a great job of getting out in front of things. But let's just take a look at the reality here. This case is extremely interesting for people, right?
Sure.
You saw the Dateline special. The fact that they gave it 2 hours is pretty big. Now, we've had cases in here where people have been wrongfully convicted. Cases from this area.
Sure.
I believe 2 or 3 cases in this area alone where, in one case, the gentleman spent how many years? 15, 16
It
years?
was 19 years.
Steve
I
Barnes.
think.
19,
Steve
Stephen
Barnes.
Barnes. Stephen Barnes, who it took DNA evidence to actually set him free.
Right.
You now have a case of people, you now have the family and members of the Yoder family that are actually a part of a campaign. There are lawn signs saying "Free Caitlin Conley." There are people, the community is split on this. This, you can't blame people. And I know this is, Frank Policelli gets very angry when people have opinions and he says they're wrong. And I'm assuming the DA's office isn't loving this conversation here. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that believe that she is not guilty. And Stephen Barnes didn't have that. Maybe it did, but it didn't have this type of hype. Now you have all of this hype. This is going to be there. This isn't going to go away in terms of this media spectacle, if you will, because we're getting contacted from family members that want to come on the radio and talk about it. Sure. Here's my opinion. Here's why I don't believe she did it, and I don't know that there's ever going to be evidence that proves 100% that she did or didn't do it. Right?
And there may not be.
And there may never be.
And that's the thing. And what I try to go back to, for me, my own personal opinion, is you went through 2 trials. You had 2 sets of juries.
Yeah.
You had competent prosecutors. You had competent defense attorneys, both Chris Pelli and Frank Policelli. And the jury still said there's enough evidence here to say 100% we all agree she did it.
Yeah.
So not having been in the courtroom, not having access to all the witnesses and all the testimony,
Absolutely.
I go with the jury. I
Right,
think most people get it right because it's not like they didn't care. They came back the first time. It wasn't like they said,
I agree
I
with
just
you.
want to get out of here.
I agree with you. Although
they sat
that's
down.
what Policelli says they did.
Well, of course. I know,
but
get it,
I agree with you.
He's going to advocate for his client, and that's okay.
And in fairness, the jury did their job. The defense did its job, and the prosecution did its job, and the investigators did their job.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean we all have to agree, but at the end of the day, to say that they had it in for her, or they didn't do their job, or that the jury just wanted to get out of there, all that stuff is unfair and not true. The fact is, they really believe that they have, and we've talked to Scott McNamara, unequivocally believes that they convicted the right person.
I agree.
Yeah.
I look at the case. I see that you've got, and I'm sure there was a lot of evidence that probably didn't make it to trial because you can't put everything.
Right,
It's not possible.
right.
But I think what makes it so compelling is you've got a seemingly normal person who, and I've said this to you many times, I think juries are always hesitant to convict young, attractive people, and I think women even more so, especially when you're talking about a violent crime. I think you see a case like this and you say, it goes totally against the grain.
Yeah.
This isn't two guys in a street corner shooting it out. This is this was done diabolically. You know, stuff was ordered through the internet using credit cards and I mean, it was.
But
it
I think
was
that was
diabolical.
all, I disagree.
It was diabolical.
I don't think that was. I think that was all done with everyone in agreement. I think the stuff. I'm closer to Policelli when he says, I don't think anybody intended to commit a murder here. I think the culture scene was ordered legally. It was done for growing purposes. And of course, Caitlin Conley was involved because that was her job at the place. I think at the end of the day, what was done with it, I guess, is in question. But I don't believe that was ever brought in diabolically at all. I don't think it was ordered in a way with any intent to kill. That was just my.
If
belief.
I could just jump in a thought on that,
and it is Policelli's belief too.
Think about this, though. The email account seems to have been created solely for the purpose of ordering that.
It does.
And I think it's interesting, the name, the Mr. Adam Yoder 1990.
I thought that was interesting, too. I would never put Mr. before my name if I created an email address.
No.
Although, if I have several, you got to make a change on them. Or somebody already has Adam Yoder. But I'd go with like Adam Yoder 1 or Adam Yoder. That's how I got one of my email addresses. But you just add a number at the end of it.
If I'm understanding it correctly, that account was only used to purchase that. And there was no other use of that account. It's not like it was
interesting.
linked
You're
to
right.
like a fantasy football team or an Avon.com or something like that. You know, I'm just.
By the way,
things
and
out
we
there.
hope
You know
to
what I mean?
have both of the prosecutors in studio this week, who can answer a lot of these questions. The problem, though, is I think people have kind of dug in on their sides. She's not guilty.
Well, and that's what you're going to see.
She's guilty. But what I'm trying to say here is, if you're involved, if you're Frank Policelli, if you're the DA's office, if you're the investigator at the county sheriff's department, if you're the family on both sides, do not blame people for forming an opinion. It's just human nature.
Sure.
And the fact that you don't have 100% proof is going to lend itself to people forming their own opinions.
Well, you know,
that is not going to go away. And I only feel it's going to get worse as this next year goes on.
Well, and I think that's probably what makes the case so compelling is the manner in which she was killed.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you look at that, it's certainly not typical by any means,
Yeah.
poisoning someone, especially with a drug like that.
And we've always talked about a female who's cute and a pretty versus some ogre that's been put up on the stand. Well, the ogre has no shot, and here's somebody that's just. What was the judge in Florida that said? Well, I'm sorry, she's just too pretty to have committed this crime.
It goes against, I guess, in your mind, what you think of as a killer.
You're right,
and I think that you search for a reason to think that that person couldn't have done what was done.
Can you talk about this? Psychology, and that is, if you could never ever cheat, then like on a spouse, you could never find it in yourself. Then to think somebody else could do it, you look at it logically based on your own beliefs. If you could never commit a murder, you look at the other person and say, well, how could they have ever done that? It's impossible because you never could have done such a thing. Mm-hmm. Talk about that.
Well, I've said this many times. I think anyone, and I mean this when I say this, I think anyone given the right circumstances, in the wrong frame of mind, think of the worst thing that could happen to you in your life, do have the potential to be violent and potentially kill someone. I do. I've seen too much violence over the years. I just think the potential's there from good people, people that are not criminals, that are good people that just snap. So I do think the potential there. What's different about this case is you don't have someone walking in on their cheating spouse and going crazy and someone gets killed. You have someone that, again, got credit cards, used those credit cards, created email accounts, ordered stuff online.
Yeah,
admitted,
by the way.
Did something with it.
Admitted that she purchased those credit cards.
All of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you look, and again, I think some people that maybe don't do it, they misinterpret doubt with reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
You know, there's doubt. There's always going to be doubt because you look and say, oh, why would she do it? There's no motive here. Why would she do it? Well, listen, motive doesn't need to be this big, huge thing. It could be, listen.
Well, there doesn't even have to be motive.
I'm upset with this. Of course, not to prove it, but not in court. But I'm saying just motive could be so minuscule that you and I would never find motive in that to kill someone, but maybe someone else would.
The other thing I struggle here is I cannot find an ounce of motive that makes any sense to me for Caitlin Conley to have
that's
committed
the thing.
this crime.
The last part of it is important. What makes sense to you?
You're right. And
not important to you. You would say, I would never kill someone over that.
You recall,
maybe someone else would.
That's how I started this question.
Maybe someone else would.
I'll leave with this. Donna says, and you can comment on this. I disagree with the DA. When the jurors came out and said hung jury, the judge said, go back, make a decision. No way would they go back and decide in 3 hours unless they were bullied to think they would be there for days.
No, it's the judges, and I think Scott McNamara has talked about this.
He read it. By the way, this ruling, although Policelli says he used it too early, this ruling, it was read word by word. It is
the Allen charge, right?
Charge.
And he's consistent. Dwyer's been consistent throughout his career as a judge that he'll read an Allen charge, and that's how you. And listen, I unfortunately have been in front of Judge Dwyer 3 times on one as the lead case in a homicide case that ended up in a conviction. So I've gone through this before.
Did he read the Allen charge 3 different times?
Well,
in the same trial,
it was 2 different juries, and then the third jury was
finally got
right.
I remember that.
That was a very long year of my life.
The defense kept calling you Hauck, right?
Yeah, I've been called a lot of things, but I think that was one of them.
I sat through 2 of those trials,
Jack now.
but at Hauck, he was pronouncing it Hauck or something like that.
It was funny because afterwards he was a New York City guy, and actually I got to know him pretty well afterwards. He said he did it on purpose. He was trying to upset me. So you're not going to upset me. I've been called way worse than that.
I just remember it was funny. He said, "You're
investigator
Hauck."
Yeah.
And you said, "No, I'm not." And he did this whole thing about, "Oh, who is this guy? We don't know who he is." And you said it's Hauck, not Hauck.
I've got a tinge of
little humor, a little sarcasm.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah. All right, Lieutenant Hauck, we appreciate that.
I remember that. That's so funny.
All right, very interesting. And again, it's not personal for anybody, but people are forming opinions, and this ain't gonna go away.
It's just I think sometimes in the whole concept that I think everybody's sort of forgetting that this woman who lost her life over really nothing she did, and it's terrible. It's unfortunate, no matter how it works.
All right, interesting. Thank you.